This book came out, Communist Manifesto came out in 1848. But in 1965, I left Hawaii and I went to school in New York, military school. First word is mission. What is the mission? Everything is mission driven. And then my instructor to study economics, he had us read the Communist Manifesto, Mein Kampf, Mao's little book, and other things. So we understood who the enemy was. When I went to traditional business school for my MBA, which I never finished, they studied U.S. economics. But we don't know what Marx economics is. And the thing that's frightening about this book, many of his predictions, he said, are coming true today. So that was in 1848. So this book was really, really prescient. And capitalism's in serious trouble. But Marx says the problem with capitalism, it leaves the bottom half poor. So you could be what he called middle class in capitalism in America, but capitalism will ultimately push you down into poverty. And so in 74, I come back from Vietnam, ERISA comes out. ERISA is the 401k today. The boomers, my generation, are toast because we're so dependent on this thing called a 401k, which is a defined contribution pension plan. Now, the defined contribution means if you put in $1 million, hopefully get $1 million back. But the old pension plan was called a defined benefit. So if you worked for Ford Motor Company and they promised you $1,000 a month, Ford guaranteed the $1,000 a month. But a defined contribution, Wall Street, as long as Wall Street stayed up, it was a good deal. My classmates who flew for United Airlines and all that, they lost their pensions. PBGC, Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporations, they took their pensions. He was talking about the euro-dollar crisis and how they're pumping up the stock market right now. My prediction is my generation, who are affluent today, will be in poverty in 10 years. Marx had one thing, he said it was the abolition of private property. In other words, we could own nothing. So they wanted to take all of our private property away, and it would then go to the state. And that's why when you study communism and Marxism, it's a centralized economy. So it's a command and control economy where the government tells you everything. And so that's why the Federal Reserve Bank is part of a communist bank. It's a central bank. And the central bank is not American, it's not a bank, and there's no reserves in it. And it's the Fed today, in 2021, is the third central bank. And for history, since Jefferson and those guys, they kept saying, we cannot have central banks. But because our academic system is basically Marxist, most school teachers are Marxists, they just don't know it. I hate to say that. If you study Marx, Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, and Mao, the central bank is Marx. And Lenin said, if you want to destroy the economy, you want to destroy capitalism, debauch the currency. So in 1971, just before I went to Vietnam, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. But they don't teach you that. You see, our system is communist. And I hate to say that because I'm a Marine. Like I said, my family were locked in internment camps. And today they're talking about reparations for the blacks. I mean, give me a break. My family didn't get reparations. They took all their land, they took their houses, they took everything from them. But what history doesn't tell you is that Hitler rose to power on reparation. What he recognized was the flaws, again in 1848, the flaws in capitalism. So stage one would be socialism, which we had in 1933, FDR puts us on Social Security, we got welfare, Obamacare, and now we have so many Americans without that government stimmy check. We're finished. Then he said stage two would kick in. So in 2020, I'm not Republican or Democrat, I'm not endorsing Trump, who's a friend of mine, or Biden. I'm saying communists took over in 2020. The fractional reserve system and bank reserve currency, which is macro, that's where the heist took place. And so what's happening today, I just got it on this here, so there was capitalism. Stage one was socialism. They couldn't accept communism at first. So what Marx says, we have to put in socialism as stage one. So that was Social Security. Everybody's now on Medicare, welfare, and all that. We're now a welfare nation. So stage one, which is socialism, completed. And my English instructor, this is in 1966, 65, he says sometime in the future, communism is going to step in. And communism is opposite of socialism. And so here I'm hanging in the sky in Vietnam going, holy mackerel, there it is. Because what happens is when communists take over from socialists, they murder the socialists. If you look at history, every time communists took over, the first people they kill are the intellectuals. And that's about to start. Let me just say this much. Markets go up and markets come down. It's coming down. And then we're going into depression. And then we go into revolution. Depression is when more jobs are lost and they're going to have to print more money. Just as they did to prevent when Fauci, fascist Fauci, shut down the U.S. economy, the whole world economy is shut down. America is now the largest debtor nation in history. Student loan debt is out of sight. Consumer loan debt is out of sight. Stock market is all based upon debt. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think we're pushing the debt to GDP ratio. Okay, with the debt to GDP, it's really simple. When debt to GDP hits 90%, so we have 90% debt to GDP. That's pretty optimal. That means every dollar you borrow, when there's 90%, the economy grows by 10%. So it's a 10 to 1, a 10% ratio. Today, the debt to GDP ratio is 140%. They cannot add any more money to it. It's not going to grow. That's what it means. Well, the reason this is happening is because we're no longer a capitalist country. Biden and company and the Fed are protecting the bankers. A capitalist country lets the inefficient fail, but the Fed and the Treasury bail out the incompetent. So that's why I feel for the working class people. I think it's criminal that our school system is part of Marxism. There's no financial education in schools, and it's not a mistake. So the people who are complaining about inflation just know it's because the Federal Reserve Bank, the U.S. Treasury, which is Janet Yellen, who was also head of the Federal Reserve Bank, they're as corrupt as they come. And they kill, exactly as he talks about here, the S quadrant, the small business owner, crush them. And that's what he predicted that in 1848.